Hello and welcome to the theElpyDimension. I am your guide, Elpy. It is the 10th of November 2024 and this is mixed worm bin number 2. The last time that I was in here was the 26th of October, so it's been 15 days, and prior to that it had been, just moving my worm blankets, prior to that it had been 17 days since I'd checked in. Right off the bat, we got tons of mites. What is on top here that they are loving? Hold on, I'm going to scoop them out. Alright, I went ahead and really just scooped them out. We got worms right underneath. And put them in the castings bucket. So I was saying it's been 15 days since I've been in here, and prior to that it had been 17 days, and I'd been talking about how I thought I'd be harvesting these castings in October. Well, now we're in November, and I think it was like a week and a half ago maybe that I did come in here. I had a need for some castings, and I scooped out stuff on top a little bit, not very much, but the last time I recorded the video from the 26th, I was hoping actually that day I only visited this one bin, and it was because I was coming down here to just sort of quickly grab some castings for my garlic planting. But then I discovered that this side, which is the side, I've moved all the bigger stuff over to this half. The stuff that's not yet, not as broken down or not broken down. So I was really surprised to find tons of worms, as we're seeing right now as well. Tons of worms in these castings, and it's probably because so much time has passed in between my checking in, and 2 weeks is... they're fine. However, I believe in my own practice. My goodness, there's tons of worms in here, which is awesome to see tons of worms, right? But to find them over here is interesting. In my practice, I like coming in and checking on them. In the last month, you probably wouldn't believe that, because I've done a terrible job checking in. But because then I can keep the material turned, keep adding oxygen, keep helping, especially in this case where we have overly wet castings. There's a cocoon. That need to dry out, and I see that they're still, I'm going to follow the suggestion of one of my subscribers that perhaps I should go ahead and just take the worm blankets off. I might still top with paper, and I know that'll, as in like shredded, oh, I don't have any shredded paper. But if I put something, if I had shredded paper, I would top with shredded paper that was dry. And I would like to believe that that would, instead of just acting as an insulation, that it could also absorb the some of the moisture. But yeah, we're seeing that these castings are still very, very wet. And I don't think I even added any water, any moisture to my last visit 2 weeks ago. Now my basement, gosh, tons of great looking worms though. My basement is not heated per se, but... well, there is one duct that doesn't run in this room. Still, we're going to find running the furnace in the house is going to be drying out the air. However, these bins are not really experiencing any drying, at least not this one. And I can only think that the best remedies for this are to, 1, not add any more moisture, 2, remove the blankets so as not to insulate them further, and 3 would be to add dry material, which I don't want to do because I don't want to add I don't want to add any more material, which makes this even more interesting, because I'm now remembering as I say that I expected to at least be able to by now harvest this side. But I'm not going to sort through all these worms. There's so many worms over here. Again, which is awesome to see this many worms. But that makes it difficult for me to harvest. And I have a bunch of material. Actually, what I'm going to add is all plant matter. I've got a ton of leaves. So I'm really thinking about doing what I did in bin 1 a couple of months ago and moving stuff over and still adding all this new material that I have. I'm really tempted to do that, even though it's not something I typically do. Okay, so last time, 15 days ago, I added a lot of plant matter, mostly living, recently chopped zinnia plant, pepper plant, nasturtium. I didn't add any food items. There was some leftover apple and grapefruit from the previous feeding, which was kind of a large feeding. By the way, I remember several weeks ago seeing a worm that I felt like, does that worm have protein poisoning? And I'm not exactly looking for it, but no one's standing out to be now as dealing with that. So perhaps that was a one-off, or not what I thought it was. So yeah, I put a bunch of plant matter in here. That might also be why they're all throughout, well, and in the harvest side. But let's go ahead and dig into what was the last feeding zone. Lots of beautiful, healthy worms. And see what we might do. It's obviously plant matter. They might, you know. I'm just going to pull this stuff out. Worms all over it. And that's obviously the stems from the zinnia and the pepper, no doubt. Oh yeah, we had an avocado, which... Okay, here we go. We got lots. We got some worms in here, but a lot of mites. And I'm going to pick the worms out and put this in the castings bucket. The mites outside are not... it's not a problem. So... Again, I'm just kind of purposefully... Oh yeah, we put some pieces of ground cherry. So that's what these are, unripe ground cherries that the... what would you call that? The casing that they were in? So they look pretty, don't they? Funny, because I actually have more ground cherry. Right off bat, we're seeing lots of worms. Though, is it... I mean, if we have to compare the other side... Normally, the non-feeding zone, I don't see as many worms. I wouldn't see a comparable amount to the feeding zone, but I feel like now it is. They smell good so far. Actually, they kind of smell like tape or something, like paper. Either way, they don't smell bad. And I remember last time it was muddy when I reached down in the bottom. And yeah, we're finding the same thing. It's still very muddy. Lots of worms, as we would hope and expect. There was a very small, with the last feeding, a very small immature cantaloupe that never got a chance to mature because the vine died that it was growing on. So, a little bit of a rotten egg smell. And you see that kind of wet. There's a cocoon. You can hear it. Perhaps you can hear it. I can hear it when I reach down there. How muddy it is. So it's looking like, given all the worms that we're still seeing, that my guess would be the reason there's so many worms throughout is there's not enough of a food source. Well, there's plenty for them to eat over here, but not a ton to make them want to all hang out in the same spot. It's almost like they hang out in the same spot when there's lots to eat, but they spread out more when there's not as much to eat. But again, you see there are worms all throughout, like every inch that we move of this material. So it's still way too wet to harvest, which is very, very disappointing. I would like to make some worm tea and feed some plants, though I don't exactly have to today. It's not like this is going to dry out. Now, okay, so here's my conundrum. I want to do what I did in bin 1. This bin is not very deep. I tend to fill mine rather deep, and the material in here is not very deep because I did take some out last time. And what I did in bin 1, if you didn't catch that video, was I had harvested half the bin, and I was going to harvest the other half And why didn't I? I think I wasn't prepared to harvest the other half just yet, but I had a whole bunch of shredded paper that was wet. So I moved a quarter of the last half. I pushed it up here. So this little pocket was old stuff. And then I put a whole bunch of new stuff there. This stuff wound up, not saying from that harvest necessarily, but this corner in that bin wound up having a really strong, funky, rotten egg smell. Probably wasn't made any better by my method because I piled up all the old material in the same spot. But this is actually winds up like less than half. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to do what I'm thinking to do, because there's a lot of little stuff that's not broken down, but outside of these stems that I recently added and some clumps of paper. But overall, this is more broken down than not. You know, it's not even like when I first separated the bin and I had a ton of paper. And I'm talking about this back in September. I had lots of paper, and I could make a whole side over here of mostly unbroken down material, bedding, if you will. And that's not really the case today, currently. So it's difficult to say, okay, I'm gonna break this up, and but I'm gonna do my best, because I think this is how I'm gonna proceed with this bin. Is gonna wind up being a hodgepodge. That being that we're gonna keep trucking along with the same sort of separating out the bigger stuff, and I really need to make it a priority to get in here weekly and stir this material. I probably won't add the blankets. I might put the blanket on this side. But I'll not cover, excuse me, this side of the bin. And get in here in a week and get it all stirred up. I do have a couple of tomatoes. Well, yeah, a couple of tomatoes to feed today. So that, while juicy, shouldn't be too big of a deal, because I've got a lot. I could just save it, but I don't want to. So we're going to toss this one more time. So many worms, my goodness, I'm so happy to see this. Despite the progress of the castings, or lack thereof in terms of progress, I can say that the population is pretty awesome. So what I need to do is, like I said, there's not a lot of big stuff, but I had sort of set myself up to not be able to take the bigger stuff and put it over there without also moving the castings. So we're gonna go like this. Sort of scooped up under them. Again, it's not going to be an exact science, but here's what we're working with right now. And here we go. I've decided, starting out, I'm going to add the food. We've got tomato, a sliced up tomato. There's a long story behind why this tomato is not a long story, but I bought this from the store because we were making hamburgers, and I never buy tomatoes from the store, but I wanted a tomato. And I noticed the core was super hard. And I've never experienced that before. And then when I got, well, I just messed it up. But then when I got to the end of the tomato, I found a little pocket of like mold. And with my own tomatoes, if it's a tiny pocket like that down in it, I might still eat it myself, away, like the pieces that were way away from it, because they looked fine until I got there. But being a store-bought tomato and that really weird hard core, I just decided I'm not even going to mess with it. Okay, then that is a tomato of mine that went bad. Eggplant, a pepper, and some brassica leaves. And then, maybe we'll... Now, actually, you know what? I'm just going to add some of my dry mix. Just for a little extra nutrients. Maybe a little bit of pH buffer. Micronutrients. Oh, I just remembered we are going to be adding a little bit of water. Rainwater. I'm sort of wasn't prepared for this. I technically don't. Normally, guys, I'm messing up. I don't normally add dry mix if I can't then also drop something wet down on it. Keep the worms from going in the powder. Because DE dry might not be good for them. Alright, anywho. Let's see how... Well, I guess I'm not using my, not going to be harvesting. Sorry for that. Oh yeah, and I have this piece of pine. Came across a split. The tree had fallen over about, it was 8 feet off the ground that it split, fell over, and it was super dry, and so I was able to peel some of these pieces of pine off of it, and I decided why not add them to my compost. I know they'll take forever to break down, but they're still adding to the soil. Okay, so, oh, this bucket's way heavier. I forgot what all. Okay. Now these are not mulched leaves. I just scooped them up off the driveway, to be honest. And actually, I have a lot of plant matter in this bucket as well that I was going to add. And I might still add. But they're stems. Let's go ahead and add this amaranth stem. I notice the shell of these will remain, but the critters in the bin, the life in the bins seem to enjoy. I am making a mess down here. Big time. All right, LP, that's it. That's all you get. All right, looks like I filled the bin up, huh? I was gonna, or maybe I still will. Well, so I'm not gonna add water, liquid, but it rained this morning, so these leaves are wet. Not all of them are wet, but they are wet. And we're just gonna push this over a little bit because we had pushed it way over. And so what I just did is I've treated this like, I treated it exactly how I was going to treat it had I harvested this half. And instead, you might notice, you might not, that the bin is doubled now in capacity, almost doubled what it was when I first dove in here. And this side is mostly new material. I'd say about 2/3. So that's like 60%, 60 to 70% new material, and that new material all being organic. Plant matter, these amaranth stems, some other stems, but mostly leaves. And then we have the food down in there. And then we have the castings that we are also hoping to harvest sooner than later. So I think that the normal top blanket I'm going to set off to the side, but I've had a bottom blanket here that I'm going to put back on top of the wet leaves. Because the leaves, they will start to dry out sooner than. So that stuff's going to remain uncovered. All right. That's it for bin 2 on the 10th of November, 2024, 15 days after the last feeding. Just a sneak peek into bin 1. It's been not a week yet, but we added leaves to the surface, and you see how much they've dried out. Well, they weren't really wet. Can't actually remember if I even put water over. Oh yeah, and it's not very deep at all. So I'll probably wet that down next time. But all right. Thank you so much for your time and your interest. Let me know what you think. If you have any other recommendations besides getting in here, turning this half getting it turned in a week. So it's being exposed more to the air, and then also just adding this new material. I think it's great. I want to believe, especially adding the tomatoes, that, and then having this, the leaves, that the worms over here will want to go here. The thing is, I know they're going to want to be in wet leaves versus the dry leaves next door. The dry leaves next door are just really functioning as a blanket, because the worms aren't really going to want to get up and all that dry stuff. These being currently wet, they'll like that. That'll be good for them. But as they dry out, they, aren't going to be as fond of it. And maybe I really should have put... Yeah, I should have. I'm not going to now. Well, then I got the fruit fly issue. I should have put leaves underneath the food. But the issue that I'm trying to get after is that as the leaves dry out, I don't want to add water to this bin because the castings absorb it first. Or not first, but the castings seem to absorb moisture first. I've noticed this in other bins when I add new material and I try to keep the new material moist, that it doesn't not make the castings more moist. And I might even find myself, as the worms move out of this material, if I come in here next time and there's no worms on top and this stuff's going to be undoubtedly drier, then I might just start skimming off the surface in terms of harvesting and wind up harvesting like that, because this being so thick, it's also going to, it's going to be way more moist down at the bottom. Okay, so that's what we're doing. I appreciate your time and your interest. Let me know in the comments what you think. I really hope to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this, or if you did, let me know. Thumbs up, thumbs down. And yeah, I hope to see you around. Be safe, be well. Bye for now.